We sang a psalm just now, but I share with you now another short one which we wanted to include. In this one, the psalmist reminds us that whatever the circumstances, we do not walk alone. The maker of heaven and earth journeys with us as our helper. This is Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Amen. And another short reading taken from the New Testament, from John's Gospel. In this passage, Jesus is talking to his followers not long before the events that we tend to remember at Easter take place, when Jesus goes to the cross. And so he knows that he's going to be leaving them, but he leaves them with promises. And these are promises which, in faith, we claim for Jason today. This is from John chapter 14. So Jesus said to them, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going." Thomas said to him, "Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way?" Jesus answered, "I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." Amen. Jason Robert Lee Smith, to give him his full Sunday name, came into the world on the 31st of March 1973, firstborn son of Maureen and Malcolm Smith. For the first 6 months or so, this new family of three lived with Maureen's parents in West Denton. There was a brief move to the pit house in Chopwell, where Dad Malcolm hailed from. But this was too rural for Maureen, and so after only 12 months there was a move back to Bexley Avenue in Denton Burn. In the fullness of time, Jason gained a younger brother when Gavin came along. Jason's schooling began at Broadwood Infants and Primary School in Denton Burn. He clearly made an impression, even in those days. One of his teachers from Broadwood, Anne Lloyd, in a letter to him very recently, thanked him for being such a hard-working pupil back then. From Broadwood, Jason then moved on to Dumpling Hall Middle School, and I'm assured that the middle school's subsequent burning down had nothing to do with Jason. He then moved on to Walbottle School and gained some great school friends, James, David, Michael and Ian, to name but four. At Walbottle, however, it would seem that his mind became somewhat distracted from classroom lessons, as he spent an inordinate amount of time trying to raise funds to get a school radio station off the ground there. At one parents' evening, Maureen recalls Jason being asked what he wanted to be when he left school, to which he replied enthusiastically, "I want to be a presenter like Terry Wogan." Certainly one habit back in those days was for Jason to meticulously log the top 40 hit parade every week, songs that were going up the charts and what was dropping off the charts. All the detail would be carefully logged each week. It would seem that he also had a bit of a fondness for dressing up, if the occasion permitted. On days out with the school, it wasn't unheard of for Jason to swap his school uniform for a Batman outfit. Yes, really. With a friend dressed up as Robin, perhaps. One of a kind? You bet. Maybe there was a quiet theatrical leaning going on back then. On one occasion, Jason announced to his mum and dad that he'd applied to audition for a pantomime, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, at the Tyne Theatre. Now, this took mum and dad somewhat by surprise, as at that age he'd shown no great interest in acting, dancing or singing. When the family got to the theatre, there was a jam-packed audience with other parents and dance schools and drama groups there. Mum and dad were pretty nervous for Jason, given the large number of people that were there. In fact, they were pretty shocked that he still wanted to go ahead with it. But he did. He had a few lines to say, front of stage, in front of this very full house, and then he returned to the chorus line to do some singing, and then back onto the stage for his attempt at dancing. Well, Jason got through the first acting bit absolutely fine with his lines. That bit didn't faze him at all. However, the singing and dancing, well, these were perhaps another matter altogether. Didn't go that well, bless him. 10 out of 10 for trying, though. I think that was the beginning and the end of his career in pantomime, am I right? There's no doubt, though, that his career in life after those school days was very varied and arguably much more accomplished. At just 20 years old, and having worked in the ministry in national insurance since he left school, young Jason headed off all the way down to London to work for the Department of Health at Richmond House, working directly alongside MPs. A couple of years later, he returned north to a job working in child benefit in Washington, the same place that his brother was working at the time. So they would try and travel from home together. Jason didn't drive at this point, but this commuting together caused a certain level of frustration with poor Gavin, because Jason would never be ready to leave on time. In due course, a job arose with the Regional Health Authority, as it was back then, based in Durham, and Jason was strongly encouraged to apply for it, which he duly did. And Linda, who interviewed him for the job all those years ago, will be sharing her thoughts very shortly. And she and Jason became very firm friends right from that first interview onwards. Flushed with the success of this new job, Jason bought his first house in Broadwood Road in Dentonburn. It needed a bit of doing up, as often first houses do, but Jason had a knack of sort of drawing in the rest of the family to start the DIY, and then he would say that he had other things to do. So he would leave the rest of the family doing his DIY for him. So it's not so much do it yourself, is it? It's get your family to do it for you. What a strategist. It would seem that the family really did put a lot of work into that house, and just when it was all finished, Jason announced that he was going to sell it. He moved up to Blythe, having met Lisa, who was to become his first wife. They'd met at a wedding do when she was one of the bridesmaids, and they hit it off straight away and were married in 1999. But the journey from Blythe to Durham by public transport wasn't an easy one, requiring buses, trains and taxis. So Mum and Dad encouraged him further to learn to drive. However, it would seem that he really couldn't get on with a manual gearbox car. Using 3 pedals with just 2 feet seemed to cause Jason a bit of confusion that he never quite overcame. Perhaps that was linked with his difficulties dancing previously, I don't know. So an automatic car got round that problem. In October 2001, Jason was blessed with his son Harry coming into the world. Sadly, Jason's relationship with Lisa came to an end, and he moved to the house in Falston Avenue shortly afterwards. Now, we've already concluded that Jason's interest in DIY was a little limited, but one thing he had a real interest for was anything science fiction, as we said earlier. Doctor Who was a particular love of his. He had a whole collection, first on VHS video. I think he had a big VHS box set, which must have taken up quite a bit of room. And then when DVDs came along, collections formed. He had every Star Trek series you could get. He loved his science fiction. And I know that Jason's stepson Damien will cherish happy memories of sitting with Papa watching science fiction together. So when, at the end of the service today, you hear the familiar theme music to Doctor Who, you'll know why. You've been warned. Work-wise, Jason really progressed through the ranks. He was very good at what he did, and I'm sure Linda will share more detail about that shortly. But it was through a work colleague then that Jason met Sarah. They became very close, and she joined him at Falston Avenue. In May 2007, they were blessed with their daughter Emily. Jason and Sarah's relationship continued for more than 6 years after Emily was born. It's perhaps surprising that I've got this far and still not mentioned one of the main passions of Jason's life, and that was his very real and authentic drive to try and be a force for good in his local community. And that was through his long and varied political life. Starting out as a member of the Labour Party, he then jumped ship to the Conservative Party and worked his way up to becoming chairman of the Newcastle branch of the Conservatives in the early 2000s. But in 2011, Jason made the very big and bold decision to form a new party, and Newcastle First came into being. Over a few years, he and others too worked long and hard, and their first seat for Callerton and Throckley Ward was won in 2019 under the new name of Newcastle Independence. And that success was subsequently built upon by Jason winning Lemington Ward and Tracy Mitchell winning in Denton and Westerhope in May 2021. And then Nick Smuter and Adam Mitchell further adding to the independent seats in May last year. A truly remarkable achievement, with Jason very much the cornerstone and driving force behind that growth. And even in the relatively short time that I've known Jason, compared to so many of you, it's still very evident to me that his heart and his motivation to really make a difference and be a voice on the ground for his people, for his community, was a really genuine and authentic desire. I want to return to family life again, because in these more recent years, another chapter unfolded for Jason, and it began when he entered the 21st century world of online dating. And it was in January 2015 that he met Cindy online. She from the island of Java in Indonesia, and he in Lemington. And despite the geographical miles that separated them, love blossomed. And in May and June of that year, Jason made the trip over to Indonesia to spend time with his newfound love and be there for her birthday. On her birthday, he proposed. And it sounds like the proposal itself was a lovely family event, as Cindy's daughter, Sophia, brought the ring to her mum and asked, can he be my papa? The answer was yes, and they were married on Java on the 2nd of September 2015. And Jason gained 2 stepchildren, becoming papa to both Sophia and to Damien. Jason was a true one-off. Always positive, always cheerful. Cindy said the other day that Jason was a true leader and also a teacher too, teaching her how to be calm, she said, but showing her how by example. Jason's positivity and determination continued completely unabated, even after his tragic and terminal diagnosis, just before his 50th birthday last year. I was just in complete awe of the way that he lived day to day with that diagnosis and with the increasing challenges that it was to bring, as I'm sure many of you were as well. He fought a really good fight, and his dedicated service to the community that he loved continued unabated too. He was still out, door to door, delivering leaflets for the campaign last year. And in the summer months last year, so 4-5 months after his diagnosis, Mum and Dad discovered him out in West Denton Park, trying his best to cut the grass there himself in the rain. And why? Because it needed to be done. So he was going to do it. I had the privilege of talking at length with Jason last year as he faced the prospect of his season here with the people that he loved coming to a close. We laughed, we talked, we cried a bit, and we prayed. And I shared with him the hope that I believe Jesus offers to us in the here and now, that he will walk through every storm alongside us, whatever it is, when we trust in him, as well as offering an eternal hope of an eternity spent in the very presence of God himself. And I can only pray that Jesus did feel God very present with him through those difficult last few months. There's quite a well-known little poem that comes to my mind when thinking about difficult times. And Maureen mentioned it the other day when we all met to chat about today. And so we felt it appropriate to share it and include it today. It's simply called Footprints. Some of you may know it. One night I had dreamed a dream as I was walking along the beach with my Lord. Across the dark sky flashed scenes from my life. For each scene I noticed 2 sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to me and one to my Lord. After the last scene of my life flashed before me, I looked back at the footprints in the sand. I noticed that at many times along the path of my life, especially at the very lowest and saddest times, there was only one set of footprints. This really troubled me, so I asked the Lord about it. Lord, you said once I decided to follow you, you'd walk with me all the way. But I noticed that during the saddest and most troublesome times of my life, there was only one set of footprints. I don't understand why, when I needed you the most, you would leave me. The Lord whispered in reply, "My precious child, I love you and will never leave you. Never, ever, during your trials and testings. When you saw only one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you." My prayer for Jason is that he is indeed now being carried in God's loving arms off the beach of life, if you like, and into eternity. And my prayer for all of us who remain is that we would all learn to give thanks for and to celebrate and to make the most of every day that we're blessed with to be given together here. Every day a gift. That's why we call it the present. And let's embrace Jesus' promise that we read earlier. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. May God bless all of you who were touched by Jason's life, and may God bless Jason as he now journeys on with him. Amen. I now invite Linda, Jason's very good friend of many years, who interviewed him all those years ago, to share some of her reflections. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you, Reverend Tim. Hello, everyone. Firstly, my condolences to Jason's family. I am both honoured and humbled to be asked to stand here today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Linda Keith, and I have known Jason as a colleague, very close colleague and dear friend for nearly 30 years. I first met Jason in 1995, a few weeks before his 22nd birthday. I interviewed him for a post in the private office of the Regional Director for the Northern Yorkshire Regional Health Authority. The Regional Director insisted on joining the panel. It was my team, as he wanted to be sure we got the best possible candidate. Jason turned up in an oversized suit with a mop of blonde hair and demonstrated a wealth of knowledge, experience and insight far beyond his years. It blew us both away. I recall one of the questions the RD asked was a bit random, wouldn't be allowed these days. Out of interest, he said, if you won the lottery, would you still come to work? I leave you all to ponder on the Jason Smith response. Jason's CV was already hugely impressive. Most people begin their career at the bottom of an organisation and work their way up. Not Jason. He'd started at the very top when he'd gone to London. He spent the past few years working for the Honourable Tom Sackville, Minister of State for Health, walking the corridors of power in Whitehall during the John Major years. Not bad going for a young teenager from the West End of Newcastle to have held his own, on his own, amongst the powers that be in Westminster during that era. Needless to say, Jason got the job. Snap him up, said the RD. He's a bright young thing and he will go far. For those of you who know that RD I'm talking about, that was a huge accolade. In that early interview, Jason demonstrated confidence, intellect, capability and tenacity, all the many qualities that he went on to develop and nurture throughout the rest of his career. The post gave him a huge opportunity to develop and direct contact with some of the most senior movers and shakers in the NHS. He worked tirelessly through some major reorganisations, gaining a wealth of experience and building real key contacts and networks that served him well in the years to come. Jason was in his element when we led the NHS appointments process for chairman and non-executive members for the new NHS trusts and health authorities. As you might guess, all the chairmen held him in very high regard. I could tell if I turned up on a panel without Jason in tow, they'd be disappointed, as they were always keen to hear Jason's stories and to pick his brains. Following the abolition of regional offices, Jason moved into the public health arena in the North East, where he found his niche for the rest of his career. He worked diligently with at least 8 of the most senior eminent regional directors across fields of healthcare, health and well-being and health protection. I know some of those senior leaders are here today, along with many colleagues and friends who he always held in very high regard, and I know you will all echo these plaudits. More latterly, Jason played a key role in supporting the response to COVID-19 pandemic, the abolition of PHE in the North East, and establishing the new UK HSA Health Protection Operations Team in the North East. Sadly, he had only just achieved a much-deserved promotion as Head of Business Operations for UK HSA in the North East, shortly before he was struck by his illness. I know members of the Health Protection Team and UK HSA are here today, and they are all mourning his loss and will miss him enormously. By a strange twist of fate, I returned from retirement to support Jason and the team with the response to pandemic. So by way of a role reversal, he was actually now my boss during the last few years. I will treasure those years and the privilege I had to cover his post during his illness. Although we've been through a few scrapes and had a few scraps over the years, we've never had a fallout. He could be infuriating at times though. If he got a bee in his bonnet, then we all knew about it. However, it was a privilege to watch that 21-year-old with an obsession for Doctor Who and Star Wars grow into the man he became. Reflecting on his career, Jason served as a loyal civil servant under 8 prime ministers, umpteen secretaries of state for health, and 4 different administrations. He was diligent in keeping his own political activities separate from his day job, but he was an outstanding public servant in all ways. I'm told when he was younger, although I have heard the Terry Wogan today and another one I hadn't heard of, but I was told he actually wanted to be the Prime Minister. I also know he said he wanted to be a clown. Can't really see the link between the two, can you? Sadly, for all his strength and resilience and determination, nothing prepared him for the severity and cruelty of his diagnosis. Yet he was courageous in his fight to carry on regardless. Although he had limited time, he used that precious time to raise public awareness of this terrible disease. The motion on pancreatic cancer and his speech to the council chamber in November was profound. Jason was an unsung hero of the North East and deserved the accolades of Honourable Alderman of the city that was bestowed upon him during his final weeks. I know it was one of his proudest moments. I saw Jason for the last time in Freeman Hospital a few days before his passing. Whilst it was cathartic for me to sit peacefully holding his hand, sadly he was suffering, he had little strength, and he spoke in a whisper. Yet I came away with a list of things he'd spotted that could be improved around patient care. How he even was able to notice those things was remarkable. I also spotted a message on my phone last night, one of his last messages, which said, "I hope Sir Jim can get this sorted when he gets here." The new chief executive of the new hospitals, the Newcastle hospitals, was who he was meaning. So in conclusion, we've all heard today how Jason was a workhorse, he was a workaholic, and he focused on his community. He was a remarkable man, but mostly and foremostly, he loved his family and his friends. He was a loving husband, a devoted father, a much-loved son, brother, nephew, a loyal civil servant, and an alderman of the city, a local councillor and a loyal friend, and a colleague to all of those present here today. But most of all to me, he was always the lad I appointed in 1995. We will all miss him, miss his advice, his support and his companionship, but most of all, we will all miss Jason, our friend. So finally, in the words of the Jedi, may the force be with you always, Jason. On behalf of everyone here today, rest in peace and bye for now.